Bracing for job cuts at Qualcomm, and the experts who say this could also mean a boost for startups in San Diego. Plus, a war of words over the Mission Valley Stadium site, the legal fight to knock the SDSU West plan off the ballot.
For all the years that they were discriminated against, they didn't have very few rights.
An honor long overdue, the campaign to recognize Chinese Americans who served this country during World War II. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. On the heels of a takeover battle with Broadcom and promises to raise earnings, Qualcomm has announced it will lay off employees. KPBS reporter Jade Hindman joins us with how this might impact the economy.
As cell phone sales slow down and the tariff dispute with China heats up, Qualcomm is left trying to reduce cost, and it could mean a startup boom in San Diego. In the battle to cut costs and raise earnings, some Qualcomm employees have become collateral damage. The corporation recently announced they are reducing their full-time and temporary workforce. SDSU professor of finance, Dr. Nikhil Varaya, has been following the company closely.
So in order to raise earnings, you have to do one of two things: either increase revenues or reduce costs, or do both.
In this case, Qualcomm is doing both. In a statement, the company spokesperson said they first evaluated non-headcount expense reductions, but concluded a workforce reduction is needed to support long-term growth and success. While the company isn't saying how many people will be laid off, the state is reporting that 1,231 employees will be cut in San Diego.
On the other hand, some of them might decide to start companies because they don't want to leave this area, and there may not be similar opportunities like Qualcomm for them.
He says while some people affected may leave the area for Northern California to find tech jobs, others will stay and galvanize a startup boom in San Diego. So, as Qualcomm struggles under the pressure to improve earnings, local finance experts at least remain optimistic and say layoffs would likely have been worse had Broadcom won their bid takeover. And Qualcomm says they have offered affected employees severance packages to ease the transition. Jade Hindman, KPBS News.
President Donald Trump isn't happy with an agreement reached to send California National Guard troops to the border. On Twitter, the president said Governor Jerry Brown is sending National Guard troops to do nothing and called it a charade. While the president is threatening to withhold money, Republican lawmakers in Sacramento hope the National Guard plan goes through.
You know, California has a lot of crime, and a lot of that crime and drugs come across our border, so I'm excited that they came to agreement to deploy the National Guard to help in that effort.
Late this afternoon, the California National Guard confirmed troops are being deployed and that the federal government is funding the mission. With the June primaries about 6 weeks away, KPBS News is taking a closer look at issues and candidates. I sat down with Democrat Josh Butner, who's running for the 50th congressional seat currently held by Republican Duncan Hunter Jr. We talked about his experience in the Navy, comments he made about service to country, and why he feels he's the best person for the job.
Well, I think I've spent 23 years serving our country. I'm also on the Homoldo School Board. I've worked in business for 6 years and have 2 master's degrees in national security affairs and defense analysis, an undergraduate degree in education, workforce and development, things that I think are really important right now. So I think that whole would qualify me to run.
And as a former Navy SEAL lieutenant commander, how do you think this experience would impact your vote in Congress on such issues such as expanding the U.S. military, putting troops at the border, engagement in Syria and North Korea?
Yeah, having served overseas myself, I know how critical it is to employ American men and women in harm's way. And so I would take those questions extremely seriously. I know what it means to lose people, friends, while serving their country. And so I think who better to make a decision like that than somebody who's actually lived through it.
And you have taken some heat recently for saying, and let me get it correct, it should be a requirement to serve to even run. Some people say that's exclusionary. Would you like to clarify?
Yeah, I definitely didn't mean it to be exclusionary. I think it was a poor choice of words. And there's so many people that serve in so many different ways, and that's what I was trying to come across to indicate that we should have this desire to serve our country. We all enjoy what our country provides for us, but it takes a lot of work to keep it going. This experiment of democracy. My daughter's up at UC Santa Cruz, and she wants to be a teacher. That's a great way to serve public education. It's really important to me while I'm on the school board. So please, everybody serve in any capacity that they can. That was my intent.
And speaking of your position on the school board, you're well aware of the strain to the district's general funds. What do you consider the biggest issue impacting California schools, and what would you be able to take on in D.C. concerning these issues?
I'm so glad you asked that. I know that the public schools are funded through the states, but just in the Homul-Dulzura School District, we had 4 students come in that have special education needs. The mandate is a federal mandate that requires us to fully support those individual learning requirements. And this in particular is a $295,000 bill, which $40,000 of it is the only part that's paid by the federal government. So there's a lack of priority placed on education, in my opinion. And so it starts with prioritizing. As you know, California is the 6th largest economy in the world, and yet we only pay about 42nd level for our education. So that's an indicator that we're not paying enough money, putting a high enough priority on education.
And records show as recently as 2010, you were registered as a Republican. What's changed? Why'd you leave the party?
Well, I never left the party. I've been a Democrat my whole life. I was raised a Democrat, and I think I think it was 2008. I wanted to vote in the Republican primary for a particular candidate, and turns out that candidate, after all, didn't reflect my values entirely, and I ended up voting for the Democrat anyway. But I think we're putting too much focus on labels of parties, and I'm running against just the opposite of that. I want to put the country ahead of party. That's what I have consistently said out when I talk to folks in the community, and that resonates with folks. I think people are tired of the back and forth bickering between the far left and right of our parties, and what's most important is being Americans. That's something that can unite us all.
And what's your stance, something that's very relevant here in San Diego, to the border wall project? If elected, what would your position be when it comes to funding?
Yeah, I think funding the border wall is a huge mistake, especially if you're going to take funds from TSA, which keeps us safer, and from the Coast Guard, which especially here in San Diego keeps us safe, and use those for a wall that I think is completely ineffective. It's like building a Maginot Line, and folks are just going to go around it as soon as you build it. In fact, you can't build it out into the Pacific Ocean. And so there are many other ways to make our borders more secure and safe. Fully funding Border Patrol is one. They need more bodies. They need more training. We have, this is the 21st century. We have sensors, all kinds of layered defense that will make us safer in a much more effective way and not waste funds on a large physical barrier.
So Congress has not passed a replacement for DACA. Would you support a bill that would provide a path to citizenship for people in the U.S. who are brought to the U.S. illegally as children?
Yeah, the DACA immigrants, that's delayed action for childhood arrivals, and we should absolutely take that action now, and I would support doing so.
Josh Butner, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
As the June primary nears, KPBS News will continue to reach out to candidates. You can see more of our election coverage at kpbs.org. If you're curious about who's donating to local political campaigns this election season, you have to dig around a county website that's hard to navigate. But Not anymore. iNews Source reporter Jill Castellano has the story.
A lot of political campaigns have to file reports with the county on how they're raising and spending money. Among them, candidates for Board of Supervisors, Sheriff, District Attorney, school boards, and special districts. The Registrar of Voters has the information, but it's not easy to decipher. That's why iNewsSource has built and launched today a searchable database so the public can easily see where the money is coming from and going. The database lets you look up campaign donations, spending, loans, and debts. You can search by a candidate's name or office for races you're interested in. And if you click on the amount, you'll see more interesting details, including a donor's employer and occupation. David Snyder runs the California-based First Amendment Coalition. He says campaign finance data like this is really important for voters.
If you can't figure out where the money for a particular candidate is coming from, you are lacking critical knowledge about where that candidate's priorities may lie.
iNewsSource's database contains over 26,000 records and will grow throughout the year. To try it out, go to inewssource.org. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Jill Castellano.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. An effort is underway to award a congressional gold medal to Chinese Americans who served in World War II. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
And that's Wu Chi-chung and Kim Wing over there. First Chinese market here.
When World War II began, Chinese Americans were not allowed to own property outside of a few blocks in downtown San Diego.
Out here, the Chinese played basketball on the street.
Immigrants faced deportation under the Chinese Exclusion Act, but thousands of Chinese Americans were enlisted or were drafted.
During the exclusion laws, the Chinese could not, in San Diego, could not live above Market Street. They were restricted to just the Chinatown area between Market Street and the bay here.
91-year-old Murray Lee is a historian at the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. He enlisted in the Merchant Marines at the tail end of the war. He put together the museum's display on World War II.
The Germans, they came so fast that they went past them, blew right past them because they were so more interested in, hitting the main army.
The museum is now part of a national effort by the Chinese American Citizens Alliance to award Chinese American World War II veterans with a Congressional Gold Medal. In the last few years, Congress has recognized Native American code talkers, Filipino Americans, and other groups who fought.
They were limited in where they could work and even who they could marry.
The Exclusion Act, which barred Chinese immigration, wasn't repealed until 1943 when China entered the war on behalf of the Allies. Laws limiting property ownership lasted well beyond the war. For those things, Lee says recognizing these veterans is long overdue.
For all the years that they were discriminated against, they didn't have very few rights.
Clearly, time is not on their side.
How many folks are still around?
Out of this group?
Yeah.
One.
One?
Yes.
The effort started in 2016. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois is the Senate sponsor for the current bill. Her office says they have 39 co-sponsors, both Democrats and Republicans. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Union workers with the UC system have voted to authorize a strike, although a work stoppage is not expected soon. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees represents 25,000 workers at all UC campuses, medical centers, and other facilities. The union says it will give a 10-day notice in the event of a strike. The union is asking commencement speakers to boycott university engagements until an agreement is reached. That includes Georgia Congressman and civil rights leader John Lewis, who will speak at UC San Diego in June. Soccer City backers are going to court. They want to have SDSU West initiative removed from the November ballot. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
Soccer City officials filed suit to determine whether supporters of a competing initiative to redevelop the Mission Valley Stadium site should stay on the ballot. The challenge was filed in San Diego Superior Court on Wednesday. FS investors argue friends of SDSU misused the school's name on the initiative and falsely gave petition signers the impression the university endorsed the proposal. They say that violates the state's education, government, and election codes. SDSU West officials called it a desperate attempt to eliminate voter choice. Both proposals call for construction of housing, a river park, commercial space, and a sports stadium. Soccer City hopes to leverage the development to lure a Major League Soccer team here. SDSU West wants to build a campus extension. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Rain moved in today, but it won't last. A warm weekend is expected with plenty of sunshine. Justin Pavic has details in tonight's forecast.
As we look ahead, still talking about the gusty winds throughout the duration of the evening. Westerly at around 20 to 30 miles per hour in the metro. As we venture out east toward the deserts and also the mountainous terrain, we're talking 40, perhaps close to 50 miles per hour. Warmer temperatures coming up the next couple of days and a dry weekend. Well, we actually had a little bit of rain earlier on today. Again, in the metro, saw around 200 of an inch of precipitation. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but it's more than we've had all month. And notice where the high wind warnings are in effect. These go through 2 a.m., including Borrego Springs and also Mount Laguna, where snow levels come down to 5,000 feet. I think there could be a couple of wet snowflakes in and around Mount Laguna as well. There go the showers, and again, they're sliding their way out over the mountainous terrain as we speak toward the deserts, and going to be looking at some drier conditions in its way, because you can see not a whole lot going on here northbound and even westbound toward L.A. and especially north toward Interstate 80. So again, you talk about futurecast here. It's going to be on the dry side as we go throughout our Friday. But for tonight, I want to talk about the winds gradually subsiding. It's going to take a little while here throughout the evening, but we get toward late night, the high wind warnings expiring. I think they will ramp up a little bit more tomorrow, but not to the extent that we saw today. So again, as we talk about, again, Ramona down to 41, Oceanside 43, Chula Vista down to 50. And then we venture on into tomorrow and notice the numbers climbing back into the upper 60s around San Diego, right about normal. Heading out toward Borrego Springs, 87. Mount Laguna tops off at 61. Still some gusty breezes off to the east, and I think those winds could still be around 15 to 20 toward the shoreline, perhaps 20 to 30 with some higher gusts over the mountainous terrain, but that's still a far cry from what we had today. Coastal areas, notice we're going to be warming things up as the flow turns a little offshore. Lots of sunshine over the weekend. We'll see that inland as well as we reintroduce the 80s Saturday into Sunday. Mountainous locations, it'll warm up as we venture into the weekend. Notice dry all the while, and that's the case over the deserts as well as we talk about the 90s. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic. Back to you, Ebony.
Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards has led the charge for low-cost health care and reproductive services for more than a decade. In January, Richards announced that she would step down from her post. KQED Newsroom Thuy Vu talked to Richards about her career and her new memoir, Make Trouble.
The Trump administration has done a number of things. It's rolled back contraception coverage. It's allowed states to defund Planned Parenthood. It's cut funds for teen pregnancy prevention programs. What else is coming down the pipeline that has you concerned?
Well, I'm definitely concerned with all those things because they do take away preventive health care and affordable health care for millions of people. We've been successful at fighting back, but I think this is going to be ongoing. One of the biggest concerns, frankly, that we have is the kind of judges that are being put up into the federal judiciary now, some of the most extreme judges, some of them not qualified. And, of course, I think everyone's anxious about if there is a Supreme Court vacancy, the kind of nominee that this president would put up.
I want to also talk about the stories that you recount in your book. You've had quite a life. Your mother, Ann Richards, was the governor of Texas,
Correct.
The firebrand that she was.
Yes.
Your father, David, is a civil rights attorney. And you write in your book that your dinner table was never really about eating. It was for sorting precincts lists. So what's your earliest memory of being politically active?
Well, I mean, I had an incredible childhood. I mean, my parents were into every movement that came through town, the farm workers, the women's movement. I think the most important moment for us, though, was when my mom got to run the first campaign ever of a woman who's running for the State House, Sarah Weddington, who'd argued the Roe versus Wade case. And as kids, we all got to be involved. And I saw firsthand both how hard it was for women to run for office and how important it was and how exciting it was because she won that race. And then, of course, Mom went on to have her own political career.
And yet you're stepping down at a time when many women would argue that Planned Parenthood needs someone with your experience at the helm.
Well, I'm really proud of what we've done over the last 12 years to invest in a whole new generation of leaders all across the country. And of course, I wouldn't be stepping down if I felt like that we were at risk. We're actually stronger today than we've ever been in our 100-year history. We have now more than 12 million supporters, which is twice the membership of the National Rifle Association. We're making a difference in states all across the country. And I'll be an avid supporter of Planned Parenthood for my entire life. But I think it's time for me to move aside and make space for someone new.
The 2016 presidential election, as you mentioned, has energized many women, younger women, former housewives who now are running for office for the first time. They're becoming more politically active, whether it's through community volunteering or actually running for office. And you have had a long history in your life of being very politically active. I mean, you protested the Vietnam War when you were just, in the 7th grade, and you were a union organizer for a long time after graduating from college. So what would be the biggest piece of advice that you have for women who are now becoming politically active?
Well, as I say in my book, which is both kind of a memoir but also a call to action, it is, I think, just don't wait for someone to ask you to do it. Just jump right in right now. I think so many women wait until they think they have the perfect resume, whether it's to run for office or run an organization. But this is the moment. I've never seen women this active, really literally shaking the foundation of this country in every possible way. And I think that if we support each other, help women that are running for office, we really can make an enormous impact, not only in this November, but at 2 years from now as well.
And yet, when the job came up for Planned Parenthood to head it, you almost didn't take it. Why?
That's right. Well, I mean, that's what I talk about in my book. I thought, well, I've never done anything that big. It's so hard. It's, I don't have the skills. And I think a lot of women hold back because they think they're not ready. And so my motto now is start before you're ready. You are, and don't overthink it. Just whatever new opportunity comes your way, jump at it.
And those are good words to end on. Cecile Richards stepping down from Planned Parenthood. So nice to have you here. And congratulations on your new book.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Scientists are working on new methods to help couples who are having trouble conceiving, which could have a dramatic impact on how babies are made. But AP reporter Krista Fourier says there are ethical concerns about the new technology.
With increasing rates of infertility around the globe, researchers are exploring new fronts in reproductive technology.
Around 10% of reproductive age couples in the United States have trouble getting pregnant or carrying a baby to term, and we don't understand why that is.
UCLA scientist Amanda Clarke is working to convert human skin samples into eggs and sperm, a process known as in-Vitro Gametogenesis, or IVG. So far, that process has worked only with samples from mice.
If the technology is proven to be safe and effective, then I think it should be used in specific cases as a way of being able to overcome infertility.
But it may not just address infertility. A prominent biomedical ethics expert predicts that parents could one day have dozens of embryos to choose from with different traits.
They'll go to a clinic. The man will give a sperm sample. The woman will give, instead of eggs, a little bit of a skin sample. The cells in her skin will be turned into eggs, an unlimited supply of eggs, and then the eggs and sperm will be combined to make embryos.
Instead of creating, quote, designer babies through changing an embryo's DNA, known as gene editing, Henry Greeley of Stanford University puts choosing a baby in the parent's hands, deciding which embryo to make into a child based on the genetic analysis.
I think that in 20 to 40 years that's going to be widely available. It's going to be effectively free because insurers and governments will want to encourage people to use it, and it's going to change the way we make babies.
But many are skeptical that Greeley's theory will become a reality.
I do not think IVG will ever replace regular human reproduction, nor do I believe IVG would ever replace in vitro fertilization.
Researchers say there are still a host of safety concerns that need to be studied before this process can be tested in humans. Some experts also doubt that people would take advantage of technology to seek out a perfect baby.
Here in California, where there are some people who would like to have a baby with as few problems as possible, there are many people in this state, and in fact they're the ones who are having most of the children, who will tell you it's in God's hands.
But the prospect is forcing scientists to consider the ethics of parents selecting their offspring. Krista Fourier, Associated Press, Los Angeles.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the end of an era. Cuba prepares for a future without the Castros leading the nation. That's coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Yesterday, Elon Musk's company SpaceX launched a satellite into space. Now he's focusing on a project below the Earth. The city of LA has taken an initial step towards approving Elon Musk's Boring Company to begin digging an underground tunnel. Musk is trying to build an underground transportation network where cars would be lowered and moved on electric sleds. LA city leaders say they're willing to skip an environmental review if it leads to a new solution for easing traffic. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, thousands of student walkouts are planned tomorrow. The call for gun reform on the 19th anniversary of the Columbine school shootings. And on Midday Edition, it's not Comic-Con, it's Comic Fest, the smaller, more intimate convention for those who celebrate everything about comic books. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.